So first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me here. I think this is excellent. It's the first conference that I've been to where you're playing musical chairs in between, so find your seating. But it's excellent that you have such an interest, and it shows also the state that we're in within the financial industry. I'll start explaining who I am. My name is Kumle. I'm a business development manager in Tieto. I'm also a concept owner, and I'm working within the financial services industry. The financial services industry is and has always been about change. So in a way, you could say it's not something new that it's changing. The very nature of the financial market is to adopt and to embrace change. But change, of course, can mean many, many different things. But it also is true that the financial market has been embracing and going through a digitalization that has been ongoing for quite some years. We had the move from the physical stock exchange rooms where you had the screaming people running around with their papers, and now it's a digital trading venues. You have cash. Cash is something, even though we heard from the previous speaker that Bitcoin is taking on the attributes of the cash, money cash. It's also something that has been changing, and most of you, I would assume, is using credit cards and debit cards and not that much cash any longer when you're interacting with services. The thing, though, is that if you look at the change that the industry is undergoing, it's quite different now. It's a fundamental change, and we're talking about disruption. It's not the change, the evolutionary change that we have been seeing accumulating over the years, where the pace has been acceptable. We're talking about a change that is so fast and so dramatic that, as the Barclays speaker was talking about, banks as we know them might not be there tomorrow. And blockchain, that I'm going to talk a little bit more about, is... where do I have the chain with me? No. Yeah. And blockchain, what I'm going to talk about today, is one of the potential means and one of the really interesting parts of this disruption and this change. So I'll talk about our view from Tieto, what we're doing, how we are approaching this subject, and a little bit on why we think it's so important. And I pointed... Yeah? Oh, I didn't do anything. Wow. Okay, let me first talk about a little bit about Tieto. As I said, I'm in the financial services area. Now, Tieto is a company that is a global company, 14,000 people. It's an IT company. I mean, not just in the financial markets. We're also operating in the public sector, in the retail and logistics, in the telecom and media, forest, energy. And as a fact, when it comes to the disruption and the change that we're seeing in the financial market, it's something that is also spreading out into the other sectors where we're operating, making it even more interesting. When you look at payments, for instance, as an area, it's something that actually has implications on how you're interacting with your consumers in the retail area and the retail arena. We are, within the financial area, we have 300 customers globally. We're quite strong on the global arena in the payments and the cards arena. But we also have a strong presence in the banks. We're working here in Lithuania with some of the bigger banks, especially the ones that has origin from the Nordics. We have over 50 years of history in this area. And that means that we're not one of the fintech startups. We have been around for some time. But the thing, though, is that our role as an IT vendor, as a business partner to these types of companies, is changing. As again, just talking about the disruption in the market is changing who is going to be the players, who are the ones who's going to be providing the financial services in the future, meaning that we, as a partner to this market, needs to change. We need to do things differently. We need to be a different type of player as well. And that, of course, is something that we need to take into our ways of working. And I think that the Barclays example is a really good example of how you, even though as a traditional player, can embrace this type of thinking and this type of change. In Tieto, we have been working quite a lot with the concept or a thinking that we call the real-time economy. We think that the economy as such is moving from this very time-stamped driven way of working, a lot of manual intervention, introducing risk, introducing fault, introducing possibilities for fraud, is changing, and we need to move into real-time economy. And the blockchain, again, the disruption, is some of the means and some of the things that will drive the need and the necessity, but also the possibility to establish the real-time economy. See if I got this working. Yeah. Yes. So, our view of tomorrow in Tieto. We see that there is a world of information. It's a massive amount of information that's out there. It's the big data. It's anything that you interact with is now accumulating data. And what you do with it is, it's just amazing what you can do with this information if you get it connected. And that's the next thing, that your connection to this information, through these possibilities of how to use it, is infinite. And we see also that the possibilities of how you can personalize it is the way that we're going to move forward. You need to get a personal connection to the infinite possibilities of all this information that is out there and is floating around. And that's where we see that we need to be a partner that can provide just that can provide the bridges, can provide the connections, can provide the tools and the means of connecting information to what's happening out there. And all this brings us as player, together with other players in the market, to get together and work. And we are moving into a world where we're not just consumers of this information, we're actually participants. I think one of the previous speakers was talking about crowdfunding, for instance. And if you think about it, when you're crowdfunding something, you're not just consuming a business, you're actually, or an action or a transaction, you're actually being a part of it. You're being a participant in the market. And this change of roles that we see as we move forward, of course, is also what's changing the game. It's part of the disruption. That is why we need to interact with the financial market differently. So, the only thing that we can know for sure, pretty much, is that the market as we know it today will not be as it is today tomorrow. So, but let's get into the blockchain. Why is blockchain interesting? Why do we talk about it? I know that many of you here has been talking and doing stuff with it for quite some time. But if you look at the market, especially if I go back to where I'm coming from, I'm Swedish, but I live in Norway. And even though I'm interacting with the financial market, with the financial services sector, yes, Bitcoin has been around, we have heard about that, but blockchain has almost had from 0 to 100 in like no time when it comes to media coverage, when it comes to interest, when it comes to how the financial companies are trying to understand it. So why is blockchain so interesting? Why, of all the fintech things, is it gaining so much interest? And why are we here? Why are we sitting talking about it all the time, over dinner conversations almost? Well, there is sort of a promise that you can see in blockchain. Blockchain contains certain elements that makes it so interesting, again, connecting it back to the disruption in the market. It has the element of trust in it. Now, I sit and operate very much and interact with the customers in the Nordics. And in the Nordics, we actually do trust the authorities. And we trust the government. And we trust the banks. Well, we did until the Panama Papers. Actually, DNB, which is the largest bank in Norway, they did a survey after the Panama Papers came out. And their perception in the market went down like this, because they were, of course, involved up until 2009, providing some of their wealthier customers with means of getting their business moved into the Seychelles or somewhere, Virgin Islands or something. And of course, Nordea is one of the banks that has been mentioned the most in the Panama Papers. So do we trust the banks? Well, again, maybe not so much as we did a couple of months ago, but I bet you that in a couple of months away from now, the trust will go up again, because we actually do have a belief in the system. I think it's in the DNA of the Nordic people. But then again, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have to change. And it doesn't mean that we're not open to change. It doesn't mean that we're not part of the global community, as we are all sitting here. And the trust that lies in blockchain, the trust that actually is provided through the way that the structure, the technology is constructed, is really important. Why it's so interesting. The second thing is digital. The digitalization that the financial market is undergoing is something that has been going on for quite some time. But we are seeing that blockchain as such could provide like the digital 2.0. You're going from a level where you're interacting, yes, on digital means, to a new way where actual digitalization is a natural and inherent part of how you're doing things. Third thing that we see as crucial and really important is the sharing of the blockchain. It's actually the very nature of the blockchain technology with the consensus of proving the blocks is a new way of sharing information. It provides a new way of thinking. The distributed ledger is creating a new way of doing business, a new way of changing your way of being a partner and a participant in the financial market. So all these things are the promise of blockchain and why it's so interesting. Could this then be the way to move forward? Now, up until now, it has been a little bit like, we found this key, let's run around and try and see where it fits. And to be perfectly honest, that's a little bit where we started. Okay, blockchain sounds cool, let's try to do something with it. We need to understand that nothing will happen unless it's actually addressing something. It needs to capture an opportunity, it needs to be something that it makes sense. It needs to solve a problem. It needs to be moving something from somewhere to somewhere. So instead, we turned it around and said that, okay, we know that the market is undergoing disruption. We know that things are happening out there. We know that our customers are facing real challenges, that the market as we know it is not going to be what it is today, tomorrow. We know that there are specific areas that are undergoing heavily changes. Like, for instance, the payments area, where the regulations is opening up with the PSD2, a new way of interacting, means that you have to open up your value chains to new types of players. How are you going to cope with that? There are also other areas that regulations is forcing into new ways of thinking. The way that you make money in the payments area, the traditional, quite wealthy or revenue-bringing area, is not going to be there tomorrow. How do you handle that? And if you have the legacy systems that most of the banks and traditional financial institutions have, they're not coping with this. And at the same time as they're not coping with the new world, they're not either providing the compliance with the regulations that are coming. So there is a duality in it. You have an old situation, an old position where you need to comply in order to stay in business, and you still have to face the new. You need to be a part of the new way of working, the new type of players who are challenging you. How do you interact with them? Digital assets, or the part where you think about where the blockchain can be used to register assets of various forms, not just stocks and bonds and equities, but also property, forest, gold, whatever you have, your car. Digital ownership is something that's crucial and important part of where we're heading to. And of course, digital identities. How do you prove who you are? Smart contract, as was mentioned, really interesting. Now, smart contracts is not something that's you can't do without the blockchain, but the blockchain and smart contracts has a really close relationship and creates an interesting symbiosis. Now, smart contracts opens up the possibility for you to have entities that starts moving around because something is changing. And that opens up, again, linked to this, the storage of the digital ownership, to really interesting possibilities of servicing and also creating more efficiency and, again, the digitalization. File storage, another one. Voting. Voting is really interesting. And I know that some of the infrastructure players are looking into this as proxy voting on the blockchain. But also countries. I mean, we have the corrupt voting in different countries where you can't trust the results, but putting it on the blockchain, and it's actually proven. It's right. You cannot hide any longer. So, as digitalization is one of the key elements as we see it, we'll just have a little look at that. Now, the blockchain technology we see can really speed up this. And it's where the transaction counterparties are moving away from trusting in this third-party centralized situation to an autonomous consensus way. So instead of going to one source, a golden source of information, the right information is everywhere. This is the trust, and this is the sharing. Another way of looking at it is that the machine-controlled autonomous processes will replace the manual processes. Again, if you look at, and I think it was our representative from Barclay here talking earlier about a question about loaning or the financial moving of transaction, moving of money. And if you look into these processes, and it's not unique for just moving money around, there are many, many, many manual steps in a transaction within a bank or in a financial institution. When you're buying property, you need to get papers on showing that you actually own the property. You need to probably pay something for that paper as well. You need to go to the bank and say, hey, I have this paper, and then you have the loan processes, not to mention it. And then you have the moving of that ownership to the next part, and it's paper, 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 and it's people touching the paper, it's people moving the paper, it's printing the paper, it's storing the paper, and it's like a forest being used in these processes, and it's supposed to be digital. And of course, that can change, but it needs to move into the digital 2.0. You actually have to move the whole process into the digital world, and that can be done. And then you have, and that's what the digital ownership. When you start thinking of what you actually can digitalize in terms of ownership, a new world opens up. Anything can be represented digitally. You just need to figure out how to move it from the physical world into the digital world and to get the connection in between. So, now, blockchain in this is not necessarily the one creating the new digital 2.0 world, of course. And it's not so that the digital 2.0 world will require blockchain entirely and then we're all fine and happy and everyone lives happily on ever after. It's a push and pull. This market is undergoing change, and it's the investigation and the exploration of this that is driving this forward. So that's, again, why blockchain is so important and so interesting. There we go. Moving into exploration. When disruption is hitting, there are pretty much two mechanisms that hit you. You can either run to the forest, hide and scream, and think that I'll wait here until it's gone. It won't happen to me. The investment banking area, like this change, is not going to come here. We've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. We are providing services that are unique. They can't be standardized. We need to be here. We need to provide this type of service in this way that we always have been doing. It's not true. So the other option, which we think is much better, is to explore, to boldly go where no one else has gone before. But of course, that's not true either, because there are many people now walking and exploring, which is good. In Tieto, we decided to take the exploration choice, not the run into the forest. Even though we do have forests as one of our sectors that we're operating in. But we decided that to explore this is the best mean of us being a partner to this changing industry, to be one who can help our customers to navigate, to understand, to change what they're doing, and to understand the implications of that. And we started out with an investigation phase. We did what pretty much everyone else was doing, meaning that we were reading on the internet about blockchain and Bitcoin and what's going on, which was fun. But of course, it needs to be a bit more than that. So we started an internal forum where we were exchanging ideas, and we pretty soon decided that this needs to be formalized a bit. So we put together a cross-industry team. Again, if you look at it, it seems like it's natural to just focus on the financial industry when it comes to the blockchain and the Bitcoin and so on, because it's like money. But it turns out that when you look into it, it's actually many industries that will be impacted by this. And also, again, remember that the industry as such is spreading out. So the financial industry is finding new ways and new means of interacting with other industries. And that's also why it's so important that any exploration is going cross-industry. So the core team, cross-industry, was established, and we also engaged in stakeholder discussions. We all have connections, especially in the home market, with legislators, with authorities, the taxation part of it, and all that needs to be part of the exploration to understand the implications of what's going on. And again, to help our customers to be a part of the change and how they can embrace it and how they can use it and utilize it in their need of change. So from there, we also, of course, are engaging in customer dialogues. And we have some projects ongoing with customers as well. Unfortunately, they're under NDA, so I can't go into details on those. But I thought I'd tell you a little bit more what we're doing. We have decided to look into a certain subset of information or areas where we think that the blockchain promise makes sense. And these are the area where you're storing information. So identity information, also about corporate actions and static data. And this storage of information on the blockchain is a possible area that seemed very promising to investigate and the outcome of that. So the way that we took on, or that we are actually still working in this area, is that it's a three-pillar approach. The first pillar is the technical part. Of course, you need to understand the techniques of what is blockchain actually about and how can it be used when it comes to storing, comes to interacting, comes to getting it out there, getting it from the blockchain to the traditional means of doing businesses and services. But it's not all. The technique side is just one side. And the technique side is also something that you could buy. You can have a business idea and you can go out and buy it from someone else and say, you need to fix this. We have this use case idea, and you can then try to build it for us and we can implement it and sell it to our customers. But that's not who we in Tieto are. We are not the ones who are just creating new ideas for our customers. We also need to be able to interact with our customers and understand the implications. That's why we decided to get our feet wet. So we put up a sandbox that we are using to explore these ideas on the technique side. Another important lesson that we learned is that it needs to be a business value driven use case. So all the areas that we're exploring is driven from the business side, the business understanding of the possibility in it. So it's not something that is driven from the technique side. The technique side is more understanding on how you actually use it and how it can be addressing the issues and the possibilities that lies in these areas. So the second step in this is understanding the processes of it. So you have the business idea or the business possibilities that you're addressing. You're looking at it from the technique side. How can technique solve some of the issues in these business cases? Second is the run it. How do you do it? How do you actually create an environment that will sustain this possibility? And this comes in as a dual business model. You have the business model for actually creating the blockchain. And you have the business model for interacting with it and using it. And there are some things that you need to take into consideration when you're looking at the how and the run part. And that is that you need to keep a lot of people happy. You need to keep the end customer happy with what you're doing. You need to keep the financial institutions happy if you're going to interact with them. You need to keep the authorities happy. And you need to keep the regulators happy if it's going to fly, at least as long as you want to stay on the inside of the legal borders. And then you have the free data. Is it going to be an open blockchain or is it going to be a private one? You have the computing power that was mentioned here before. How do you supply that? How do you provide that type of position? How do you provide a blockchain that is fueling itself? And what's in it for you? Who is going to be a member of this part of the business model? So that's a very interesting and also somewhat tiresome this exploration that needs to be done. But it's very much, it comes down to what business model you want to be providing in this area. And it will be different. It will be for various arenas, different business models. So one size does not fit all. The third part is, of course, maybe the most interesting, is what can you get out of it? How will it actually impact and interact with the players of today and the newcomers and the greenfielders and the fintech startups and so on? How will all this get together? How will it connect together? The business usage is where the ecosystem really kicks in. You can't do it, it doesn't make sense if you do it alone. So you need to make sure that it's connecting both the new and the old. And this is what we see, at least, where the existing and the traditional financial institution comes in. That this world that we're talking about, this disrupted world, the new financial services market, that is going to emerge, or that is emerging right now, that is introducing new types of players that are doing new things, and where we are becoming participants rather than consumers, it needs to be connected to the old world. It's not going to change overnight. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and tomorrow there is a brave new world where it's just blockchain and fintech. The banks will be there for at least a couple of more years. And then you have oldies like me, who is not a millennial, and I still trust, sort of at least, the banks a little bit. And I am interacting with them, and I still want to get my salary, and I want to be able to use it and pay for stuff that I can't buy with Bitcoin. So the bridge between the new and the old needs to be there, and it's a very important part as we see it moving forward. Yes, the banks might not be there in 10 years from now, as we know them. They might be gone, they might be replaced, they might have taken a new role, hopefully they will. And that's what we want to be a part of exploring and helping to understand. Because there, in the change, it lies lots of possibilities. So this business modeling from the usage and the connecting the new with the old, we see as a crucial part of the exploration phase, for understanding how you can use these new tools and how you can become more efficient and how you can become a member of the new financial market. So, yeah, of course there's considerations in our findings that we have been concluding with so far. When it comes to the blockchain technology, and I'm sure that at least some of you will disagree with me on this one, there are parts that seem to be a bit immature and unproven. We're talking about the 10 minutes it takes to have a block on the chain. That's not acceptable when it comes to real-time economy. 10 minutes is too long. We're talking about parts of the industry where you're putting servers on the same site as in the stock exchange in order to make sure that you have no latency. 10 minutes, forget it. It's not going to work. So that needs to be solved. Scalability. The number of transactions that needs to flow through a system needs to be, even if the sizes that we're seeing on the Bitcoin presentation, they're impressive, of course, but the number of transactions in total that are involved in the financial market is much more than that. So scalability needs to be sorted out. Of course, there's this culture and perception we've been talking about. Yes, there is a connection between blockchain and Bitcoin, and yes, Bitcoin is perceived in certain areas as somewhat dubious, and it's the terrorist currency and all that. And of course, you have the schizophrenia of the capital market, or the financial market, where the traditional banks are somewhat, maybe at times, a little bit conservative, and where this might be perceived as very trendy and not so trustworthy. But then again, all this can be solved. The investment appetite is another issue. How do you get all the traditional parties and the members and the players in the market to actually invest enough in order to be a member? What's the business case? What's in it for them? What problem are they solving? How fast can they run, and how fast are they willing to run? And then, of course, finally, the regulatory and the legal side of it. By taking the legal side, taking the authorities with you on the journey, and having the regulations in place instead of working against them. So, but everything that is a consideration or potential problem, of course, there is an opportunity in it as well. And that's why, again, blockchain is so interesting, why it's so important that we can't disregard and we have to be a member, we have to be a part of this. It's not going to go away. It's going to be a part of our future, willing or not. And the possibilities, or the upside of it all, lies in where there is a common interest. And there are many areas in this that has a common interest between the new and the old, between regulations and legislators and authorities, and the fintech, and the newcomers, and the greenfielders, and the old existing players. Transparency is something that, especially in the EU, has been forcing the legislators and the regulators to address and to come with more and more regulations. It's all about opening up the transparency to prevent fraud. You don't want to be fooled. You don't want to have grey economies and shadow economies. You don't want to have all money going away somewhere that you lost it all. So transparency is a part of this where we have a common interest. Cost efficiency, yeah, of course it is about that. Of course it is about cutting cost. The efficiency in the digital 2.0 world is something that is just blowing your mind if you think about it, what you can reduce in terms of costs, and to put it honestly, very risky parts where you have manual intervention. And security, of course. Cyber threat, cyber security is an important part, and where this is now promising to provide a lot of that in the way that you implement it, is of course again a common interest to the industry, both from the traditional side and the newcomers. So bringing them together, bridging it, is where you see the real possibilities. At least that's what we do. So, what next? What are we doing? We are, as said, continuing our investigations. We have some areas where we are working together with some customers, working together with some infrastructure providers, and we will be launching things together with them, for them, helping out to get into the brave new world. But also we see that all of you from the traditional side has a role in this, and that is to take the responsibility to go out and explore. And all of you from the disruptive and fintech and startup side also have a role in this and has a responsibility, and that is to introduce yourself to the oldies, to come and knock on our doors, and to invite yourself also to the processes and to challenge the way that the market is operating, because it is under disruption. And of course, the unicorns, the new ways, the really disruptive things will not come by just sitting and thinking of how you can change what you already are doing. The really disruptive things comes when you're taking it totally out of place and putting a new thought into a completely different arena. And that we're going to see happening as well. And that part, of course, is something that we will welcome when it comes, but it will be tiresome when we try to implement it. So, but ecosystem is a way of moving forward. You need to be a member of that. You need to find your partners. You need to think innovation. You need to embrace it. Like the Barker initiative here is, I think, an excellent example of how you embrace innovation. And that's also a model that we're using inside of Tieto, with inviting different type of players from different industries, getting together around a topic and discussing, challenging ourselves, addressing different types of problems, and like hackathons and so on. Also involving regulators and other types of players in the market. Agile, I would like to say finally in this, what's next, is really important. You need to be willing to fail. Failing is a really important part of moving forward. You will fail, but you need to fail fast and get back onto it and start again and try the next thing. Oops. Now I lost it. Well, I'll go back here. When it comes down to it, it's all about going out there and seeing the forest and not just the trees. You need to look at the whole picture. You need to be a member of the exploration. And again, we in Tieto are doing that, and we want to connect with anyone who's doing that, and are opening our minds to, hopefully, to the ones who are as well open-minded out there. Thank you.